This is Unscripted Her. One family, four voices. Smart, fun, what's really going on? Finally, our discussion unscripted.
Hi everyone, we are back with Unscripted Her. Woo! Hi. We're down 2, so we don't have the aunties. COVID is just continuing to run amok, so we want to make sure we're staying in prayer for everyone impacted by this pandemic. But we got us. We got the mother and daughter. Yep.
We
Ellen
did.
and Donnellda. Yes, I think we're twinning a little bit.
Are we? We're in the same family pod. It's come to this.
Yeah, we are pretty much quarantining. So we've got our 5 in our pod, and she and I are in our pod. But more excitingly, because you see us all the time, we're back with our Game Changer series, and we are here with someone who's very near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
And a true public servant.
Yes.
And a game changer. Another first, y'all. We are here with the first ever Chief Race and Equity Officer for Arlington County, Virginia. Doctor, okay, I know you don't have your doctor yet, but I just feel like it's coming. It's going to be honorary or something. So in the spirit of your great mother who started the Hampton University Student Leader Program. I wasn't a student leader, but I did go to Hampton. So in the spirit of your late great mother, Dr. Bird.
So should we talk a little bit about Samia's outstanding resume? I mean, she joined the county in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
She was both the county's planning, housing, neighborhood service, and a lot more words, historic preservation, zoning, and inspection services division chief. And then she moved up to deputy county manager. And
you were city planner. I remember that.
Yeah, I was principal planner.
Yes,
she was principal
over
planner.
10 years. Yeah, she was a planner, principal planner. Then she was deputy county manager. Yep. And now, was it June?
July.
Her latest appointment, the first ever.
Yes, and Samia has a master's in city planning from Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And also a bachelor's in city planning from University of
UVA.
Yeah. And you know, that's one of the things we find a lot with our game changers is they have very atypical paths. I mean, they didn't go and become a lawyer or a pharmacist. They become things that you go, you're a nuclear physicist, why? You get stuck in the line, what happened? But what
chief, equity and race officer, like you said, that is such a big concept. And I was reading one of your interviews. You Google you, and it's just like pages now. So Washington Post, and whatever, Arlington's magazine, all these interviews you've done. And one of the things that you said in one of your interviews was like, race is not a project, right? It's not a project. And so much of our jobs and everything is based on, like a tangible product or outcome.
Yeah.
So, race, what is that? What is your job? What does that all mean?
The exciting thing for me is that I get to kind of create it because there isn't anything like it. There are probably people that are doing some level of this, maybe in jurisdictions, but not in the way that I'm thinking about it, which really is to get people to start to change their mindset. So we're talking culture change that then affects action and behavioral change when we start to talk about race and understanding the importance of it in the work that we do and having a racial equity lens, which we talk about a lot, that it's not a project, it's a long-term proposition. Because from my perspective, we're looking to address systemic racism. A lot of times, people are like, well, I'm not a racist, or I don't, they get really offended, of course, when we start talking about race, especially in government. But one of the things that we really focused on and learned a lot about when we did the cohort program and we started working with CARE is that race, just the way that everything was founded in this country, that's the structure in terms of economics, legislation, policy. So All of it,
We were
exactly.
looking at some of the healthcare
Yes.
disparities in Arlington, which was amazing considering the wealth of the county, but yet you have a very high incidence of illness among gay and Latino and Blacks, and they actually have a 10-year shorter life cycle. 10 years because of their zip code. 10 years. If I live across the street, I'll live longer.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting about that too is that so that group, Destination 2027, their recommendations were the ones that they were pushing the manager and the board to do an equity resolution. And they were pushing them to address, to have a position, like maybe a year before we did it. But if you overlay the demographics on the zip code, that's where all of the Black and brown people live.
You gotta drop that knowledge.
Yeah.
And the immigrants.
That is good. Yeah.
So that's the thing, that people are still, everybody wants to talk about equity broadly, but they don't want to acknowledge that racial equity, we have to be that specific if we're looking to make changes. And the thing that we talk about,
that certain zip codes have a higher level of death.
Exactly.
Negative.
It's by design. It's by design.
Thank you. And you would know that as as an urban planner. Did you all ever study that in school, the design of racism?
So we don't say it that way, of course. But yes, we know that. We know that there was redlining. All of that stuff formed, our development patterns and how places are developed in determining who can live where. And then that determines what people have access to based on where they live. And all of that stuff is rooted in, even in places like New York, segregation and racist policies in terms of the land use and zoning and the types of housing that are available to certain people based on zoning, or who can modify the housing, restrictive covenants, who can live in certain places based on all of that stuff is, roots of planning. There are a lot of things that we talk about and we learn about in terms of, how places were built. I'm sure now there are probably courses that focus on, policies that segregate or that, when I was in school, not as much. We learned about it from the perspective that I focused on it. So when I was in planning, my area of focus was more housing, economic, and community development. So I was able to study more of, disadvantages, populations that are marginalized based on planning, some of those things that we talk about a lot in terms of housing and economics.
Even environmental injustice. Right now
Environmental
today in Louisiana, as an aside, they're fighting the placement of chemical plants in their communities. It is not accidental that highways went through Black and brown neighborhoods. That was a deliberate proposition. So people don't understand that the vestiges of slavery, of Jim Crow, of redlining are sitting right in your neighborhood. Go outside your door and look. We live in a beautiful historic district. They're always touting our village as the first, federally planned for
people that
to support the war effort. It was for World War I to support the workers, but they also had a covenant tacked on: don't sell a house to a Black person.
Absolutely.
And every time I look at that sign, I want to tack on a little "don't sell a house to a Black person" reminder, because everyone's benefiting from this gorgeous, walkable, best school in the city. And I mentioned this because you're from down here. You know this area.
I do. But I mean, if you think about stuff like white flight, in the suburbs and, gentrification, all of those are like planning concepts,
Exactly. Or deliberately zoning neighborhoods only for a certain group of people.
And for a certain type of housing that everyone can't afford, like single family housing only, as opposed to opportunities for different forms of housing. And there's a lot of studies going on now in a lot of cities to look at missing middle housing, which is, housing that is like duplexes and triplexes and other forms of housing that might provide opportunities for more people to live in those locations that don't have the higher incomes per se. It's a little controversial.
So going back, and I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. So we're gonna ask one more question, and then we're gonna take a quick break. So what's the next question?
But why don't we start with this? Arlington did a lot of homework, it seems, before they created this office. They spent some time studying They had senior leaders like you going off, participating in various various committees, and just learning. My question is, what made Arlington decide to look at impacts of race and other forms of economic distress on their community, and what was your involvement in it?
It's funny because I would say 2018, there was a retreat that the county manager's office went to, and it was sponsored by, so there's a Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. They're a regional body for everything related to planning. So there are a bunch of jurisdictions in our area that are part of this, what we call COG. And they did a retreat for city leaders. So they have a committee for their administrative officers. So that's all the mayors, county managers that run the jurisdictions in the area. They had that. And so we were all invited as deputies to go. This was around the time, too, all the Me Too stuff started happening. And there was a lot of discussion around that. So we would go to this day-long retreat, and there's this organization there called the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And they do this whole series with us about why it's important to address race in government. Mm-hmm. And so when we came back from the retreat, I just started talking to the manager. I have a really good relationship with the county manager where we're always able to just have frank conversations. So we were talking about Me Too, we were talking about the retreat and how impactful it was, and, started thinking a little bit about what we should do. And one of the things I said to him, and I don't know why in that moment I did, but I just was like, you do know I'm the only person in your office in a senior leadership position that looks like me.
Wow.
And he was like, I wasn't asking him to do anything about it. I was just like, I just need you to be aware. Because, we always walk into these spaces, especially Black and as women. And the first thing I always do is survey the room. Like, am I the only Black person? Am I the only woman?
Yep.
And it happens all the time.
Yep.
And it happened to me when I was a planner for 10 years. And even in that office, there are other women there, but I'm like, there's nobody here. And even in a leadership, the highest I think we have maybe are some division chiefs or some department directors that maybe were Black, but that's it. But I just had the boldness to say that to him because I knew that we would be able to talk about it. And so we just kept having conversations, and he was like, well, what should we do? I'm like, I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm like, I'm just letting you know that something, needs to be done, and we just need to be more mindful of it. And so COG, though, at the same time, they wanted to do something within the region to start because GARE had been doing work out west. So, a lot of our examples of good things to do, especially when we're talking about progression, come from like places like Seattle or Portland, especially in the planning world. And so race and equity, no different. So GARE had been out west and they were trying to expand to the East Coast and they wanted to do something in the region. So they asked for certain people from each jurisdiction to kind of get together and create a work group to think about how are we going to address race and equity regionally and what should the governments be doing. So I had the opportunity to participate in that. But at the same time, because of that conversation I had with the manager, it was more about, okay, well, as a leadership team, what should we be doing? So I got people to come and start talking to our leadership team about race. So really, it's just like, okay, it's me pushing race on the leadership.
Yeah.
So how after that, they did the study, they had the 10-month council, and then the board passed a resolution. And
so that happened kind of at the same time.
Okay.
So
could you tell us about the resolution, what it was, for those who haven't read it?
So probably we do have one Black elected official, and he is Christian Dorsey. At the time he was chair. So each year the board members
council.
So we have a board. So we're a county form of government, county manager form of government. So we don't have a mayor, we have a county manager and then an elected board. So we have 5 board members and they pretty much direct the county manager.
Good. And that is something we want to ask you about in a minute, how you do it all and make it look so easy.
Yeah.
So you moved forward, the board did its investigations, they identified 5 key areas, and then they created your position and said, go forth and do.
And for a certain type of housing that everyone can afford, like single family housing only, as opposed to opportunities for different forms of housing. And there's a lot of studies going on now in a lot of cities to look at missing middle housing. which is, housing that is like duplexes and triplexes and other forms of housing that might provide opportunities for more people to live in those locations that don't have the higher incomes per se. It's a little controversial.
Yeah.
So going back, and I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. So we're gonna ask one more question, and then we're gonna take a quick break. So what's the next question?
Well, maybe we'll just ask you a question, kind of just to get to know you a little better. Please tell me how you manage it all. You and Steve have been married forever. You're one of the model marriages of America. You have 2 beautiful children. You're active in a number of things. Your church, your Delta, your civic organizations. How do you do it and look this good?
God is good.
I'm gonna go take some notes because I'm watching you, sis, and I'm like, she is doing it.
I'm serious.
Is she doing it?
I honestly don't know, other than just the graciousness of God. Quite frankly, quite honestly, I don't really set out to do certain things, but I'm learning to balance and understand when I need to take those breaks, when I need to take care of myself, but really just trying to create spaces for the different things and making sure it has to be God, that everything kind of aligns, that, the work that I do aligns with the civic things that I do, aligns with my family and our values. And it makes it easier, I think, when everything just connects and lines up, because then you're in sync with all of those things and they make room for you, and they make room for the different people that need to be with you in those spaces. So really just trying to be more conscious of it and just trying to know that, okay, I am a mother. So there needs to be time where I'm focused on just being a mother. I am a wife. So there are times where I need to be focused on just being a wife. Then in my workspace, okay, this is what I do in my workspace, but try not to, necessarily bring that into those other spaces, but they do align and they make room for everything. So I don't know. It's hard, but it just works out. Like I said, because God just lines it up that way for me.
Wow,
will.
Your gifts make room for you, and I think that you're an example of that. Your gifting and being a wife and a mother and a executive, they all make room for you. Well, we have enjoyed this first segment with our first and our another game changer, Miss Samia Bird, the Chief Race and Equity Officer for Arlington County, Virginia. We will be back with more episodes with Miss Samia. So please, if you haven't already, you can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, Unscripted Her. Instagram follow Unscripted Her, Twitter Unscripted_her, and also Facebook Unscripted Her Official. So please check us out.
This is Unscripted Her.